Hi there, I'm Sven Masterson from Mentoring Men. One of the things we do on Mentoring Men is help men that are navigating very complex relationship challenges like sexless marriages or low or no intimacy marriages. You'll find these described different ways out on the internet. You might find people talk about this as being in a relationship with a partner who has sexual anorexia. Really, pick your term. What I mean is a man who is in a relationship who is having sexual intercourse with his partner 10 times or less per year. This is a very difficult thing for men in that situation, and a lot of complexities come up for him in that process. And in this video, I want to talk to you about a common question we receive from men in these kinds of relationships, and that is, what do I do with my sexual energy? Because there's no place to really use it, because the intimacy, the physical intimacy, I should say, with the partner is not present. And so men routinely need to know, what do I do with this feeling of pent-up sexual energy? And it's if that man is anything like most men, he'll do some Google searches and he'll come upon the term sexual transmutation. And there's a lot of talk about this on the internet for different reasons. And it can be a curious and very enlightening thing to learn about in a sexless marriage, because sexual transmutation is turning your sexual energy into some other kind of energy. It's learning to do something different with that energy than having sexual intercourse. And so I want to unpack kind of some things about sexual transmutation in this particular context that might be tripping up some men and giving him some challenges when trying to think about, well, how do I do this? And why am I finding it so hard to transmute this sexual energy? Whereas a man who's not in a sexual relationship is generally going to look into the subject of transmutation for really different reasons. Some guys do it because they're trying to overcome like an obsessive, habitual masturbating kind of habit, or other guys because they want to simply reuse that energy to something creative. And I think that's actually the most profitable way to explore that subject. So let's talk first about this word transmutation. The literal word transmutation means to change from one form to another. And so when we talk about transmutation of sexual energy, we're really talking about taking the energy we would put into sexual intimacy or sexual acts and using it in some other way. And this is why it's such a big subject for people in sexless marriages, is because they can't give this energy, or I should say they're not giving this energy, to the sexual relationship between themselves and a partner. And so they wonder, well, what do I do with this? All right, so let's back up, knowing that it means to transform energy from one form to another. And let's start there. The first thing we have to realize is that we're not transmuting sexual energy. We're just transmuting energy. We are energetic beings. This is demonstrable at a physics level, a biological level, physiological level. We are machines that require and have a massive amount of energy flowing through us. And so sexual energy is just one way the energy in the human frame is expressed. And so it can be really helpful when you're talking about sexual transmutation to first start with the understanding that we're always transmuting energy. We eat food, we turn it into labor, we turn it into thinking, we turn it into activity, we turn it into all kinds of things. So we are fundamentally beings that transmute energy. One of the ways we use that energy is in some form of sexual act, really. But a sexual act is biomechanically not a lot different than some of the other acts we do with the body. And so all of those are transmuting energy. And so the real question is, what do we do with that energy that we wish or we would like to use sexually? What do we do with that instead? And if you come back to this basis of understanding that we're all always transmuting energy, it gets a lot easier to understand this concept, because there's no such thing as just sexual energy. Energy is energy, and the laws of the physics in the universe inform us that it can change shapes, but it cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. And so it's simply a matter of having an energy budget as a human, and what do we want to do with that budget? Now, in a sexless marriage, what a man wants to be doing with that budget, or part of that budget, is having sexual intercourse and relationship with his partner, but he can't. And so he has a surplus of energy. It's not a surplus of sexual energy as much as he wants to think it is. It's simply a surplus of energy. And as with any budget that has an overage, we can spend that, we can save it, or we can spend it somewhere else. And so the very first thing we have to get our minds around is that this is about how I budget my energy as a man. And in a sexless marriage, because I have a surplus of energy, what do I do with it? Knowing that, the next important thing we got to talk about is that you have to have energy. You have to be filled with energy. You can't transmute. You can't change from one form to another. Nothing, right? And so a lot of men mistake their neediness for sexual energy. They're not the same thing. Energy flows from a human inside to outside. Now, we consume things like food and whatnot, but our energy actually is internally derived, and humans feel best when the energy is flowing from within to the outside, right? We're made as beings that prosper in every way when we have energy flowing out of us. But a man in a sexless marriage has oftentimes got this completely reversed. He's actually operating in the world in a consumer mode, saying, I need, I need, I need. That cannot be a basis for transmitting sexual energy. And that's why a man in a sexless marriage who looks up sexual transmutation tends to be stumped and confused and sometimes downright irritated, because he's trying to imagine changing the form of an energy that he doesn't have to begin with, because he has neediness. And neediness can feel a lot like a high libido, but a high libido, a drive for sex, can come from two different places. In a healthy man, an emotionally, spiritually, physically healthy man, a sexual desire has this outward vibe to it. It is a giving energy. It's a generous energy. It's a desire to go out and spread and give and to bless, dare I say, right? It's a desire to share what's inside with what's outside. It's a penetrating kind of energy. It's a reproductive kind of energy. It's a way of being as a man that says, I want to populate what's around me with goodness. And now a lot of people are going to get irritated hearing that, because they're not used to thinking this way. But that's how a man's insides are wired. Men desire to spread goodness. And our physiology simply mirrors this. If you look at how male anatomy works, we're meant to put ourselves into places and spread life there and reproduce and multiply and spread, hopefully, good things, the life force, right? So to transmute that would mean to change it from that form to something else that mimics that. But you see, if we're operating in a needy mode, we're out there saying, I need, I need, I need. It's a complete reversal of how a man is wired. And so you can't transmute because you're not starting with this life force within you that is welling up, that is ready to go out and multiply and fill that space and to spread love. And so this is why a man in a sexless marriage tends to really struggle, because he has a backwards view of sexual intercourse and intimacy. He sees it as something he receives instead of something he gives. And so when he thinks about transmuting, it's like talking in a different language. And so he's got to fix his understanding of what it means to be a sexual being and what sexual energy, what the expression of sexual energy feels like in wholeness. It's not about getting something, it's about giving something. Now, does that check any nice boxes inside? Do we get benefit from that? Of course we do, right? Just the same way that we get satisfaction if we paint a beautiful painting or write a beautiful poem, or we go out and operate in our community in a generous way and in which builds our community and those around us up. That feels good. And that, I think, is our body telling us this was a great way to use that energy. But a man who's got this all backwards because he doesn't have anything to transmute. He's out there trying to get energy from other people, namely his partner. He can't think this way. And so he's not free to think about changing this energy because it's not his energy to begin with. He's operating under the understanding that his partner contains the energy. And he's generally angry, frustrated, bitter, and resentful that she's not giving him that energy. And so transmutation is not a good thing to be thinking about while you're in that mode. It'll just frustrate you. Instead, you want to be thinking instead of solving your neediness, solving the nagging feeling inside of you that's saying, I can't be satisfied, full, or whole until she gives me this. And that's what we actually spend the most time working with men in a sexless marriage, is helping address this sense of insecurity, this sense of not having value and worth and significance as a man unless a wife or a woman looks towards us in a sexual way. All that is actually unhealthy and dysfunctional in a man's life. It'll make him depressed, it'll make him feel low, it'll make him fearful and anxious, and all of that undermines what a man is about. And what we find is if we can turn that around, and we're actually very good at that on mentoring men, we could help men change their perspective from being a consumer of energy to a creator of energy. Now that man begins to experience fullness. Now, two things happen when this happens. First of all, when a man has that shift, it is often that shift that fixes or corrects the sexless marriage trajectory, because it's a turnoff to a woman when a man is sexually needy. But when he switches that around and he sees it as his gift to give instead of his gift to receive, that oftentimes brings his partner and he back together in an intimate way that eventually leads back to physical intimacy. And so that guy may not have a whole lot of questions about sexual transmutation because he has now at least one outlet for sharing that part of himself. But other men, including those men, can learn there is real power in transmuting sexual energy. And this is how people have understood this for centuries. And that is to withdraw some of the energy you would use, not necessarily in intercourse, but more specifically in ejaculating. Instead of giving that energy to that, to use that to keep it, or what some people call semen retention. And that's really about not being the kind of man that is giving your seed or your life force to the wrong things or to just things that you feel like are not the best use of your energy budget. And that man will choose to hang on to that energy. He'll still give intimacy and connection and be with his partner, but he's going to just temper what he does specifically with that life force. And instead, he's going to direct that to more creative pursuits. And you might think of that as a way to metaphorically ejaculate something bigger than the act of sex. Now, I'm not trying to be crude with saying all these things. I just want you to understand what transmutation is all about. It's keeping some energy from something that is of lower importance to you so that you can use it in something that is higher importance to you. So typically, where a man will really benefit from transmuting the energy he would give to sex into something else is a man who is trying to give birth to something much bigger and bolder and courageous in the world. Maybe something that feels very much like mission and purpose and something that feels like legacy. That's a great place to think about sexual transmutation. That's a great place to withhold some of that biological seed so that that energy can be used for focus and drive. This is why warriors throughout culture who have been engaged in important battles have decided to withhold their seed. They wanted the energy, they wanted the singleness of purpose, they wanted the drive to be able to wage war that was important to them and to defeat their foes. And so that's the way to think about transmutation. And all of that, if you're in a sexless marriage, is generally off limits. Now, it doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means you can't transmute neediness. I can't say that too many times. If you're struggling in a sexless marriage, your very first thing to address is how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your partner, and how you feel about the exchange of energy between you. We find without fail that men in sexless marriages, with the exception of maybe men that are married to partners that have disabilities that are just completely not overcomable sexually, But every other man generally has a consumer needy view of sex. He sees his partner as the one who decides if, when, how, etc. And he has yielded his sexual self to his partner. And that is not a basis that transmutation can help. You must address that mindset first. Now, if I've said anything in this video that has made you curious, I invite you to scroll down. You'll see a link where you can click to set up a free complimentary session, and we can talk more about things like this. We could talk about transmutation if you like, but I'm more interested in talking to you about those deeper needs, that sense of neediness, that sense of I don't believe I have value and worth, or I struggle with that if my wife is not friendly to me, if she's not intimate with me. That's the thing that we're really keen on helping men with and overcome, and we're very good at it. Now, if that's you and you've never talked to us before, scroll down and set up that call. You have nothing to lose. We're not going to try to sell you anything. We're just going to share with you what we have seen work in lots and lots and lots and lots of men around the world. Guys in decades-long sexless marriages, guys in months. It doesn't really matter. It's easy to feel hopeless in these circumstances, but we believe that the approach that we help men with, and we've seen it, it really works, and it's very helpful. If you're curious about that, scroll down and click that link. If you have questions about transmutation, please leave them below. I'd love to hear your comments. If you think we're nuts and this transmutation stuff and all this stuff I'm saying is bizarre, let me know that too. And with that, I will wish you a good day, and I'll see you in another video. Take care.